great to see everybody here. Welcome to day 3 of Brandweek. We're going to kick things off right away. I am going to start by welcoming to the stage my very good friend, Michael Ventura. He's a thought leader and an author on empathy and leadership. He's an agency founder and now a co-founder in a new business that we'll learn more about today. And side note, he's Linda Boff's BFF. So please join me in welcoming Michael.
Morning, everybody. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm going to start with a question. How many of you here got to the place, you're all successful people, you're here at Brandweek, you're doing stuff that's important. How many of you got to the point in your career you're at today by always being the smartest person in the room? Raise your hands. Yeah, maybe one narcissist that I can't see, but generally I don't see any hands going up. Okay, good. So far, so good. How many of you instead, perhaps, got to where you are right now because when a fork showed up in the road or a decision had to be made, you got quiet and you trusted your gut? You listened to your intuition. How many of you have done that in your career? Yeah, good. All right, you're all in the right place for this talk, at least. My name is Michael Ventura. I am a recovering agency founder. Are there any other masochists in the room? A couple other masochists around? Yeah, I'm sure. Look, 20 years of doing it, and I built a company called Sub Rosa. We were a brand strategy and design firm. We worked with a lot of brands. We worked with a lot of brands who are in this room, in fact, right now. And it was a lot of fun. It was also really hard. It was hard for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the ways that it was hard for me was at some point when you're a consultant, you get really caught up in being the smartest person in the room, always having the answer, making sure that the client's happy because you've thought through this more than they have and you know what they need to hear. And it's not easy and it's not reliable to always be the smartest person in the room. And so we started to ask ourselves as an organization, where's the intuition? Where's the gut stuff that we can get back into the business? And we got quiet and we did a thing most services businesses don't do, which is to make yourselves your own best client. We turned the lens inward and we asked, what is it we could be doing better or different? And the answer that appeared was to practice empathy. So why empathy? Well, real powerful empathy isn't guesswork, right? People talk about empathy as standing in someone else's shoes, seeing the world from someone else's perspective. That is a component of it for sure. But if you're standing here looking at someone there and guessing what it must be like to be them, you're going to get it wrong most of the time. And if you do that, you're also bringing with it your own bias, because what Michael wants in Jenny's shoes is not necessarily the same thing as what Jenny wants in Jenny's shoes. And so the more effective way to do this work is to actually admit the thing that none of us want to do. We don't know the answer. And instead walk over and ask a question. What's it like to be you? Tell me a little bit about the situation you're in. What can I do to help? How can I support, right? And when you do that, a window into someone else's world opens up in a really powerful way. And that person might be a client, might be a customer, might be a colleague, might be a partner, might be a friend, but they give you permission to go in and learn something a little bit more. Alan Watts has this great phrase that I like to steal, which is, everyone wants to be interesting, no one wants to be interested. And I think it's really interesting to be the most interested person in the room, often. So along the way of building Sub Rosa, we wrote a book about this. It's called Applied Empathy. It went out into the world, and that led to calls from holding companies and eventually an acquisition of the agency. And in 2020, I finished my time there. And I found myself asking, what am I going to do now? Because this is all I had ever done. It had been 20 years of building this business. This was sort of wrapped up in my DNA. And then one day, the phone rang. And for as long as I have been in business, I've always encouraged my teams, take the meeting. Take the meeting. If you have the time, take the meeting. You never know what's going to happen. And the phone rang, and it said, Assad. And Assad's an old friend of mine. We've always had good conversations. He's always working on interesting things. He said, what are you doing? I said, right now, I'm going to pick up my dogs from daycare. But he's like, yeah, like you're not at Sub Rosa anymore. What are you going to do next? And I was like, I don't really know. He goes, can we have a walk and talk? I said, sure. So he meets me to pick up the dogs. We go on this walk, and he tells me about how him and his best friend, John Stevens, and John's wife are talking about launching a business in the pet category. So Assad, right out of university, went to work at BCG, and his best friend at the time was John Stevens. And a couple years later, Assad's on a track to continue in his management consulting and then eventually PE career, and John Stevens becomes John Legend. And so many of you probably did not know he started as a BCG consultant, but he did. And so he says, we're starting this business. I know you've been a brand guy forever. I know you've been a dog guy forever. Maybe we can do something together. And this thing above my shoulders was like, oh, that feels great, but also doesn't really fit into the narrative that I've been building in my career. Like, this is a big pivot out of brand world and empathy and thought leadership. But this sounds here really interesting. There was something to pay attention to. There was something that felt like, oh, wow, there's something cool here that I could explore that I haven't had a chance to do yet. And so maybe it doesn't fit into like the plan, but maybe it's something worth listening to. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to do a brief dog interlude. This is the first time I'm doing this, and I'm going to talk about my dead dog. So if I get teared up, that's going to be a thing that I just want to say to everybody. So all together. Okay, great. That's Daryl. I wasn't always a dog dad. But one day, this little exhausted Office Max manager ends up in my life, and he's just the sweetest little boy. And I really didn't know what life would be like with a dog. He was my first dog, but he really hit me in a good way. And Daryl grew up into an amazing boy. He also grew deeply into our hearts, and that, dogs have a way of doing that. He showed you how to feel seen. Right? He was the best empathy teacher I ever really had at the end of the day. He knew what I needed. He knew how to show up. He knew how to listen. He's a great dog. Around the age of 7, Daryl got his first bout of cancer. He survived it, but it was scary. It really shook me because I was like, oh, this is going to happen again, and I'm not ready for this. Thought of losing him was really tough. I knew we'd lose him at some day, but I didn't want it to be that soon. And so we did what many pet parents will do. We got him a sister. And as you can tell, he was stoked about Mary. Look, we didn't just get him a sister because we thought it would help our hearts when the eventual happens. You remember in the pandemic when we were all making sourdough? Right? So I sort of think about Daryl like sourdough starter, right? Like, I always want to have a dog that knew a dog that knew a dog that knew Daryl, right? Like, I want like that chain to continue. And so Mary was a way to sort of do that, to start to imprint some of him on her. And it took some getting used to for him. He was the king of the castle, and then, his sister basically just decided, I'm going to lean on everything you like until I get it. But it was sweet. And eventually, they started to become friends, and they learned how to fit into each other's lives, right? They found how to make it work. And eventually they became inseparable. So we lost Daryl a little over a year ago, but he's never really been far from my heart. I think about this dog every day. I'm actually wearing his dog tag under this right now. And when I tell you I'm a dog dad, and that dogs really opened up new parts of myself, this is now you know why, right? Like, this is part of the story. These are my life. And what a time to be a dog, right? Since the pandemic, dog demographics have exploded. There are 2 times more dogs living in American households than kids under the age of 18 today. Yeah, more dogs are being parented by people of color than ever before. More dogs live in cities than ever before. The pet industry has grown by over 30% since the start of the pandemic. The pet industry is over a $150 billion category right now. And when I talk to people about their dogs, this is what I hear time and again. My dog and I were meant for each other. And I'd like you to think about, if you've ever had a dog in your life, or you have a dog in your life right now, have you ever said to yourself, man, this is the one for me. This is like, I knew this was my dog Somehow we ended up together. Raise your hand if you felt that way about a dog. And you're like, of course, we all have, right? It's amazing that that happens. And so it's cool to know that like they have that magic. They have that supernatural thing that they bring into your life. They're like, oh yeah, this one is the one that's meant for me. And that's why we call this Kismet, right? This fated connection. This thing that we don't necessarily have an empirical way of describing, but we understand that, wow, this is how we've come together. It's a special bond. Hard to replace, hard to replicate in other relationships. And so here I am on the stage opening today's session because, yeah, I was an agency owner and I speak brand as a first language, and like we're all here because we all do that too. I'm also here because I've been teaching empathy in organizations and helping teams learn how to work better together, and we all care about that because we want to understand our colleagues, we want to understand our customers better. But I'm also here today as a proud dog dad and a co-founder of a business that we're going to hear more about in a moment called Kismet. And it makes me smile because, if I think back as to like the foolhardy arc of my career that I thought was, rationally the way I was going to take it, and then I think about that goofball Daryl intersecting my life at the right moment and sort of opening my heart to dogs and being willing to trust my intuition and sort of take a different path, I wouldn't be here today. So I invite you to listen to your gut. You've said you've already done it and it's helped get you where you are today. It's the original you, right? It knows what you need to feel full and seen and nourished in a way that's way better than that thing above your shoulders. So keep listening, keep going, enjoy today, and tell your dog I said hi.